Afternoon. Appreciate everyone coming today. I'll make a few statements. 22 countries have legalized same-sex marriage. Mexico has legalized in some of its jurisdictions. I would like for us to look at what has already happened in Canada as well as in our own country. J. Mark Brewer, a former U.S. Air Force JAG officer, is a lawyer in Houston, Texas. He was counsel on an Americus brief filed in the Oberfeld case before the Supreme Court. And here's what he wrote in an article in the Western Journalism entitled, "Legalized Gay Marriage Will Have the Huge Impact That No One's Thought About." And it's subtitled, "Anyone Who Opposes the New Manifesto of Homosexuality and Gender Neutrality, Gender Identity is at Risk." This is June 15th of last year. It's just a few days before the decision. In the article he says the same people who first claimed only to want tolerance to the behavior will allow no toleration of other views. Will a physician be forced to perform an artificial insemination for a lesbian couple? Will a lawyer be forced to take a case defending gay marriage? Lawyers are already losing their traditional prerogative to exercise absolute discretion in the selection of clients. And he goes on to talk about some cases in California. He goes on to say in the article, even pro-same-sex marriage libertarian John Stossel has said that gay marriage movement has moved from tolerance to totalitarianism. And also in her article dated June 3rd, 2015, in the CNS News entitled, "A Warning from Canada, Same-Sex Marriage Erodes Fundamental Rights." This was by Don Stefanowitz, writes, these are some lessons to learn from Canada. In Canada, freedoms of speech, press, religion, and association have suffered greatly due to government pressure. The debate over same-sex marriage that is taking place in the United States could not legally take place today in Canada because of the legal restrictions of speech if you say or write anything considered homophobic, including, by definition, anything questioning same-sex marriage. You could face discipline, termination of employment, or prosecution by the government. So other concerns that I've ran into as I've done my research about this issue over the last several months. Parental rights. Parents who want to say and what their children are being taught in school about homosexuality have found legalized same-sex marriage is a trump card, which overrides their parental rights, leaving them pretty much no say in the matter. Tax-exempt status. Pastors and churches will eventually face pressure to perform and celebrate same-sex marriages or face government retribution, such as the loss of tax exemption status or possibly be prosecuted for discrimination. Accreditation and licensing. Private schools, accreditation professionals licensed, and even employment criteria will increasingly require affirmation of homosexuality and same-sex marriage as a condition for approval. Counseling. I am a counselor. There will be a continued push to ban counseling for teenagers who struggle with unwanted same-sex attractions and who desire therapy to address this. Grant exclusions. Faith-based charities that adhere to God's design for sexuality, marriage, and family will be excluded from government grants to help save the poor and needy at the home and abroad. Endangered freedoms. Freedom of speech will become endangered as the government passes regulatory and even criminal laws punishing Christians' views of marriage, deeming it hate speech in any type of media, including radio, print, television, the web, etc. So these are some of the things that we've seen, and this went on to say this has already happened in Canada and the UK. I spoke yesterday with Representative Scott Sanford in Texas, who was the author of the Pastor Protection Act there. And we talked about the process he went through and the process that we've gone through here in Georgia this year. And he shared some talking points with me, so I want to read a few of those for you this morning. Is the Religious Freedom Restoration Act enough to protect clergy and pastors? That was a question that was asked. That was a question that was asked here in Georgia. The RFRA is vague, and it really is. It balances religious exercise against the government's compelling interests. No one really knows, without enduring a lawsuit, what the outcome of that issue will be on any given circumstance. Secondly, they ask, isn't this bill unnecessary? Christian pastors in Houston, Texas, they are deemed the Houston Five, recently had their sermons subpoenaed by the mayor for discussion related to the biblical view of marriage and sexuality on church property. That was in the United States. That was in Texas. Thirdly, could a faith-based social service organization that accepts tax dollars, like a homeless shelter or food bank, decline to serve interracial families under this bill? The answer was no. And that question came up here in Georgia as well. And they go on to say that it relates, their bill relates to marriage, and that they were unaware, and this is what I wanted to point out, we are unaware of any homeless shelters or food banks in Texas that cater exclusively to married individuals. Fourthly, would a justice of the peace also be able to claim religious freedom under protection of this law if that justice of the peace is a pastor? And again, the answer was no. That answer would also be no under the law under the bill that we passed here in Georgia. Another article I want to share with you, Brady Miller, in his article, Same-Sex Marriage 10 Years on Lessons from Canada, November 5th, 2012. This was in the Witherspoon Institute. He made the following observations. The effects of same-sex civil marriage in Canada, restrictions on free speech rights, parental rights, and education, and autonomy rights of religious institutions, along with the weakening of the marriage culture, provide lessons for the United States. Rental of properties by religious groups, religious organizations such as the Knights of Columbus were fined for refusing to rent their facilities to post-wedding celebrations. Freedom of speech, targets that have included individuals writing letters to the editors of local newspapers and ministers of small congregations of Christians. A Catholic bishop faced 2 complaints, both eventually were withdrawn, prompted by comments he made in a pastoral letter about marriage. Teachers are particularly at risk for disciplinary action, for even if they only make public statements criticizing same-sex marriage outside of the classroom, they are still deemed to create hostile environments for gay and lesbian students in the classroom. The law does not shield sermons or pastoral letters from the scrutiny of human rights commissions. It leaves congregations vulnerable to legal challenges if they refuse to rent their auxiliary facilities to same-sex couples for their ceremony receptions, or to any other organization that will refuse the facility to promote a view of sexuality wholly at odds with their own. Last night, I took a poll across the state of Georgia. Here are the results. This poll was done by Rosetta Stone Communications, and it was a statewide poll. 720 Georgians responded with a margin of error of 3.7%. And I think we'll have part of this poll available a little bit later if some of y'all would like. The majority of Georgians, 55.55%, are neutral on the FIDA part of the bill, of the Religious Liberties Bill. This is all the more reason why I think we need to continue to talk and to educate Georgians. 61.3% of Georgians support traditional marriage, while 27.4% of Georgians support gay marriage. 11.3% had no opinion. When asked if it mattered that those who hold traditional views of marriage might be persecuted by government, the numbers stayed pretty much the same, with 57.1% of traditional marriage, 27.6% same-sex marriage, and those with no opinion 11.3%, so they increased by 4%. When asked if they support government or employers not being able to discriminate against those that hold the traditional view of marriage, 44.7% favor, 29% are neutral, and 26.2% opposed. 43.1% were Republican, 33.9% were Democrat, 20.2% were independent, and there was a small percentage left over. They weren't quite sure what they were. So, in conclusion, It's time for our governor to step forward and sign the bill that the people of Georgia clearly want. The bill has been vetted thoroughly through both chambers of the General Assembly. Now, I appreciate the fact that our governor has taken a slow and methodical view of the bill before he signs it. But in the end, I'm sure that he'll find that this is the best bill to protect everyone in Georgia. Now, throughout this process, I've asked for input, and I've shown that my door's been opened, and I've made a lot of changes. I want to talk about a couple of them. When I first authored FIDA, there were those who complained about probate judges being able to refuse to fulfill their duty to issuing marriage license, death certificates, and so forth to same-sex couples. This was, talked about what happened in Kentucky and so forth. I specifically changed the bill to address this, and that language is still in the bill today. Secondly, there were complaints about the broad definition of religious organization. The Free Exercise Protection Act limits it to 501c3s. Remember, we had a big discussion. A lot of people were concerned, S corps and corporations. We limited it to 501c3s. Thirdly, there were those who complained about sincerely held religious beliefs being too broad. So in the final draft of the bill, we said sincerely held religious beliefs as demonstrated by its practice, this is the faith-based organization, its practice, expression, or clearly articulated tenet of faith. Now, I've shown over and over again that my door has been open and that I was listening. I've listened, I've made adjustments. Now we need to look at where we are in this state and nation and deal with the real issues. Will our state and nation, going forward, be a state and nation that is intolerant of those who express a sincerely held belief that marriage is between a man and woman? And will expression of that belief in the workplace or marketplace lead to sanctions by local, state, or federal government in the name of tolerance? I say no. That's not the America that I grew up in, and by the governor signing this bill into law, it preserves freedom. Georgia is not a state of intolerance. We are the home of a great people. Habitat for Humanity was founded in Georgia. Home Depot, Coca-Cola, Aflac, UPS, Chick-fil-A, and many, many more. Georgians have done great things in our state, nation, and world over the years. My mother was born and raised in Buckhead, and that was before it was Buckhead. My father was born and raised in Sumter County. I'm just as at home in Sumter County, Georgia, as I am in Midtown. Georgia is a great state. Trying to tear it down by speaking badly of its people is a shame. The Free Exercise Protection Act needs to become the law of this state, and I am confident that other states will follow. Now, I'll take a few questions.
Senator Kirk, you, when asked about the bill and businesses criticizing the bill, you said that basically in other countries where some of these businesses do have operations, chop the heads off of homosexuals. Was that made to somehow comfort LGBT Georgians if the bill isn't that bad, or what kind of message do you think that sends to people?
Well, I don't know, when did I make that statement? Did I make that to the press?
You did, I believe it was in Albany Herald a few days ago.
Was it in Albany Herald a few days ago? Okay. My point was that there seems to be a difference in ideas here, and that is, why are you attacking Georgia when, again, I've just gone through this bill and shown you that we've listened, we've worked, we've tried to tweak this bill. I think we've got a good bill before the governor now. Why would you attack Georgia for passing a bill like this, yet see no problem doing business in other countries where that is the case, that homosexuality is illegal and in fact punishable by death?
Senator Kirk, the pastor protection portion of the bill now includes language about no one being forced to attend a wedding that violates their religious beliefs, and it gives them an action against government. Why include that? What's the scenario you're trying to cover there?
It's to protect the pastors that don't want to participate in a religious ceremony, and so that's it in a nutshell, it's to protect the pastors.
But that specific line in the bill says anyone couldn't be forced.
Right.
So how would you respond to somebody that says, when it says no individual will be forced to attend a wedding, what if that includes a photographer or a baker or something like that that goes to private business, and they say, well, it says any individual, so I'm an individual, I don't have to attend that. How would you respond to that concern, that by saying any individual opens it up to outside of pastors?
I don't think that was the intent there. I think that the intent is to say that, I mean, I've been to a lot of weddings, of course, I'm a minister myself and conduct a lot of weddings. I don't think anyone wants to be forced to go to any wedding or participate in any way. I think the businesses would have to deal through the RFRA part of the bill at this point. I don't think that's going to give them the protections that I think you're reading into that.
As a minister, would you perform a same-sex marriage?
I would not.
But going back to the individuals part though, why put that in there? Because how many people are actually going to be forced, who are not ministers, who are going to be forced to attend a wedding unless you're directing it at somebody who, you know, like they said, a baker, a photographer, a florist. I mean, why your normal person isn't going to be dragged to a wedding like that?
Well, and that's right, and I think that was the point, to be very sure that that's not going to happen or could not happen in our state.
Senator Kirk, this morning, the Atlanta Convention and Visitors Bureau said they've already had 15 companies who've contacted them saying that they will likely pull their business from the Atlanta area if this bill is signed into law. Do you have any reaction to that? They're saying this represents possibly $6 billion.
Right. I'll say this, Georgia's the #1 place to do business. That has not changed. This bill does not change that one bit. It's the #1 place to do business because our governor and our General Assembly has acted in a way to pass tax breaks and other laws to help business, and we want to continue to encourage that in our state. So I just don't believe that's going to be the case when it's all said and done.
The Albany Herald article, you also mentioned that you're planning to meet with Governor Deal this week. Have you already done that, or what do you plan to discuss with him when you sit down?
Well, today is day 39. It's a very, very busy day for us. So we are working on that scheduling now. We have not met as of yet. I didn't get into town till late yesterday afternoon anyway. But yes, we will be meeting soon, and I'm going to talk to him about this bill and try to encourage him to answer any questions that he has.
If the governor does decide to veto the bill, what would be next for you? What action would you take following that?
Stay tuned, and we'll see. I don't know. I'm optimistic that he's going to sign the bill, or he has another option. He doesn't have to sign the bill, and it'll become law July 1st. So there's more than one option.
Senator,
More than two options, actually. Yeah, wait, just wait.
Well, you
Go ahead.
You mentioned this you've had an open door. You've been willing to address others' concerns about this bill. If the governor were to come to you with some concerns, some changes, maybe some suggestions, would you be willing to take those up, perhaps in the final days here or in a special session later on?
I haven't closed those doors. Even at this point, it'd be very difficult to try to do something, but nothing is impossible. I'm learning in my second year here at the General Assembly. Yes, sir.
just going to ask you, as you're bringing this up, a lot of the guidelines kind of fall with federal, that's been said, and some of the talking points that were sent out. So if it falls with federal guidelines already,
Right.
why do you see this as necessary, and why did you bring it up and forth to push this bill?
Rephrase your question. Help me understand.
If much
where
of
you're
this follows federal guidelines already,
Right.
why is this needed at the
Why-
state level?
It's needed at the state level to protect the state, just like the religious RFRA bill is a federal bill, and but yet the Supreme Court said each state has to protect their own version to protect their citizens, and so that's why this bill is needed in Georgia. That's one piece of it, and I think the FIDA bill, there's been some talk that some believe that we should let the federal government deal with that part of it as well. However, Georgia's taking the lead in that, and I don't see anything wrong with that for two reasons. Number one, how long will it take the federal government to accomplish that? They haven't done it yet. Number two, even if they do, who's to say the Supreme Court won't say the same thing about that part? And so we're just taking the lead. If the federal government does step up to the plate and pass something, Georgia will fall in line and follow the federal government's lead.
In your talks on this, have you spoken to any of the openly gay lawmakers in the Assembly?
Yes.
Even in this revised version that came out last Wednesday?
No, I have not. Now, remember, we finished Wednesday night late, and I went home, and I just got back yesterday, so there really hadn't been a whole lot of time.
Even before though, when there were talks about this new bill, so when that bill that hit the floor on Wednesday, there was no talks with any of those three?
Any of those three that would.
Art Cannon, Carla Drenner, and Keisha Wiggins?
No, there was not. No.
One of the questions that has been consistently asked about this bill is if it doesn't promote discrimination, why isn't there non-discrimination language in there?
Well, actually, I think we do repeat the state constitution and the U.S. constitutions about discrimination in the bill. That is in the bill. So there's no other discrimination. Yes, sir. Do you have a question?
One more, guys?
But it doesn't include local ordinances, and as I'm sure you may or may not be aware, state and federal laws don't protect LGBT people. Those protections in Georgia are found in local ordinances. That wasn't included in the bill. Was that purposely left out to do an end run around those ordinances?
Well, even on lawmakers one night, the question was asked about adding sexual orientation to discrimination language in Georgia. Is that what you're getting at?
No, I'm saying, you mentioned that the bill does include a clause that says won't supersede protections offered by the state and federal law.
That's correct.
But LGBT folks are not included in those. They're protected in Georgia in about 60 places by local ordinances. That's not included in the bill.
Right, and so that was the question, should that be included in the state law for discrimination, sexual orientation? And it was already pointed out that night that there was a bill introduced to do that this year, and it didn't go anywhere. And I said that tells you already that the appetite's not there for that at this point. So again, that'll be part of the discussions as we go forward.
But
All right.
can I ask you one more regarding that? Because the city of Atlanta has, I think what he's trying to say is there are local ordinances out there.
Right.
And there's some concern that the bill will supersede local ordinances like the city of Atlanta's. Do you think that could be the case?
Well, federal law trumps state law, and state law trumps local law. So
So yes.
that's the way it works. Okay. Thank you so much.